This video is on the topic of solving an inequality for Algebra 1 or Algebra 2. So one of your classmates had asked, how do you solve this inequality? So x squared minus 6x is greater than negative 8. So I've outlined 4 steps to solving an inequality. Step 1 is to set the inequality greater than or less than or greater than 0. So right now it's greater than negative 8. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this to the other side so that I can make this a 0. So here I have x squared minus 6x is greater than negative 8. I'm going to add 8 to that side. So when I do that, I get x squared minus 6x plus 8 is greater than 0. So that's step 1. So step 1 is to make it less than or greater than 0. And the reason why we do that is because in step 2, I want to solve for x when it's equal to 0. So right now, temporarily make it an equation and then solve for x. So if I temporarily make this an equation, meaning make this an equal instead of a greater than, well, if we set it equal to 0, we know how to solve this because this is a quadratic equation and we know how to use factoring to solve this. So find out when the inequality will equal to 0. These are called critical numbers. So the x's that I find out for when I solve this are called critical numbers. So I'm going to factor this. So hopefully at this point you guys are pretty familiar with factoring. So I'm going to get x minus 4 and x minus 2 is equal to 0. I use a zero product property, so I get x minus 4 is equal to 0, x minus 2 is equal to 0, so therefore x is equal to 4 and 2. So these are what we call critical numbers. So if you guys get to calculus, you will also see that word critical numbers as well. So critical numbers are numbers that makes the equation equal to 0. So if I plug 4 and 2 in here, it will make this equal to 0. However, I'm not interested in finding out when it equals to 0. I want to know what numbers will make this greater than 0. So I'm going to next do step 3, put critical numbers on a number line and test points around it to find out if it will make the inequality greater than 0, less than 0 or greater than 0. So I'm going to draw a number line. So my critical numbers are 4 and 2, so I'm going to put them in order. Here's 2 and here's 4, so smallest to bigger, smaller to bigger. Okay, so 2 and 4, at x equals to 2 and x equals to 4, I know that my inequality will equal to 0. So everything around it will either be less than 0 or greater than 0. So I'm going to test points. So I'm going to test points before, between, and after to see if I will get a positive or a negative number. In other words, will be greater than 0 or less than 0. So here I'm going to test a point less than 2. So let's pick a number less than 2. So let's say x equals to 0. So if I chose 0, so here if I let x equal to 0, if I let x equal to 0 and I plug it back into this inequality, you can plug it in here or in here. If I plug 0 in here, I get 0 minus 0 plus 8, which would give me 8. So 8 is a positive number, so I'm going to put a positive. I'm going to plug in a number between 2 and 4, so say the number 3. If I plug 3 in here, do I get a positive or negative number? Again, you can plug it in this one or this one. It doesn't matter because they're the same thing. This is the factored form. If I plug 3 in here, I get 3 minus 4 is a negative number. 3 minus 2 is a positive number. So negative times a positive will give me a positive number. I don't care what the number is. I just want to know whether it's positive or negative. So when I plug in 3 in here, I get a positive. I'm sorry, I get a negative. If I plug 3 in here, I get a negative and a positive, which will give me a negative. Okay, lastly, I'm going to plug a number after 4, so say the number 5. If I plug the number 5 in here, I get 5 minus 4 is 1, 5 minus 2 is 3, so 1 times 3 will give me a positive number. Okay. So here, right, I realize any number that I plug in that's less than 2 will always give me a positive number. Any number that I plug in between 2 and 4 will always give me negative. Any number bigger than 4 will always give me a positive. So if I plug in 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, if I plug it into this inequality, I'll always get a positive number. So here, I know what types of answers I'll get based on what numbers I plug in. So now answer the question. Well, the question is this. What will make this inequality greater than 0? In other words, I want the positive answers. So here my positive answers are here and my positive answers are here. So when I answer the question, I'm going to say, and it says to graph your answer. So here's 2 and here's 4, my critical numbers. My answers are all the positive ones. So I'm going to do an open circle on 2 and an open circle on 4. The reason why it's open circle is because it does not include 2 and 4. There is no equal sign here. It's greater than. There's no greater than or equal to. If there was an equal to, I would put a solid dot. But since it's strictly greater than, I do an open circle to signify that it does not include 2 and 4. And I want all the positive answers because I have this inequality is greater than 0. In other words, I want all the positive answers. So I draw my arrow here to say this is an answer and this is an answer.